All right, great. Got some responses there through the chat. So thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. We're excited to be hosting our fourth small group meeting to receive feedback and input from the community on some options that have come about through some stakeholder interviews that we've conducted in the community over the course of the last couple weeks. And we're excited to hear what you have to say about those alternatives that are being presented. And I wanted to preface that by saying that nothing in these sketches has been determined. This is all very fluid, and the purpose for these visualizations is to really help facilitate community input and facilitate a refinement and focus to the most viable alternative. We do want to recognize Mike Dowling with Dowling Architects, who has been working on putting together these sketches, and thank him for the great work that he's done. And also recognize that we want to create a plan that is actionable, that can be implemented, and is achievable. And it's really important for us to hear your comments and your input so that we can make sure that it's reflective of the community's goals and objectives. So with that, note from Michael McConnell, and I'll just say, I'll just read this. If you have a question or comment, please raise your hand through the participants tab or announce your question in the chat and wait to be acknowledged by a moderator. With that, Mike Dowling, I'll turn the time over to you. Mike will go through the different options that he's put together, and then we'll open it up for comments, questions, concerns, and community dialogue. So with that, I'll turn the time over to Mike.
Thanks, Adam. So I was just looking at the participant window, and it looks like there's just two that probably haven't seen this, Georgia and Kevin. And I guess I'm wondering if either of you saw the presentation on Tuesday evening, or if this is the first time you've seen it, because I think everybody else has.
Mike, are you able to join in on the conversation? I'm not able to hear you.
I'm talking. Can nobody hear me?
I can hear you, Mike.
Okay. Adam, you can't hear me?
There we go.
Okay.
I can hear you now.
So I was just saying that it looks like there's two participants who haven't been in one of the daytime sessions already, and I was just asking if they perhaps saw Tuesday night's presentation, or if this is their first time seeing the diagram. So it looks like Georgia and Kevin are the only ones I haven't seen yet. So if either of you want to maybe mention.
I just sent something through chat. I don't know if you can hear me.
I'm not hearing.
So Georgia just responded through chat saying that she hasn't seen the presentation, and Kevin briefly looked at the plans, but he hasn't seen the presentation either.
Okay, perfect. All right, well, let me share my screen and we'll get started. All right. So the first slide is just a Google Earth view of our project area. And to orient everybody to the screen, the left-hand side would be to the south. The right is to the north. The bottom of the screen is the east. The Rodney Street neighborhood would be down there. And then, of course, the top is the west. So our project area starts with Cruse, where it intersects Park on the south corner and goes through to Lawrence, which is where the Holter Museum is, and stops there. we sort of intentionally have left out the section that goes to Mini Malfunction Junction just because of the complexity of that intersection, and sort of see that coming out as possibly a future task. So with that, we have broken it down to two sort of equal areas. We've got the section of Cruse that goes from Park Avenue to Broadway, and then the section from Broadway to Lawrence. So one of the things I'll talk about just briefly, with Cruse Avenue in sort of general terms, we talk about right-of-way, which is the legal property boundaries, I guess, between what is roadway or the right-of-way for the road and the private properties on either side of it. And Cruse's right-of-way is 65 feet wide. And essentially, all of that is paved or hard surface, which is unlike most residential city streets or smaller city streets where right-of-way might be 60 or 70 feet wide. For example, Last Chance Gulch in front of the Bagel Company is a 70-foot wide right-of-way. And many of the streets coming off of that, like 14th or 15th streets, are 60-foot right-of-ways. The difference is all of Cruse is paved. So it seems like a very large area of surface space. And that's kind of what we have to work with. Now, there are a couple of exceptions. On the south end where that park space is, it obviously gets much wider because it encompasses both little spurs that lead to park. And then in this area where Cutler Street comes in, sort of reminiscent of highway on-ramps and off-ramps. And in fact, that is kind of how they were designed. And so this entire space of triangular area is also within the right-of-way. So the two schemes that we've been, or options that we've been sort of studying are a narrowed street option and then a linear park option. And there are similarities between the two of them. The narrowed street option basically takes what we need to do for a street and parallel parking on either side of it, and limits the paved area, with the exception of a bike lane, to what's required to do that. So we've got two 12-foot drive lanes, and then on either side of that, before you get to the curb, would be 8-foot parallel parking. So on both sides of Cruse, the entire distance, we would have parallel parking and the two drive lanes. So that takes about 40 feet of street width. So of our 65 feet that we have to work with, it leaves about 25 feet that we can turn into bike lanes, boulevard, park-like walkways, and pedestrian pathways. So consistent in all the slides, there's a dark gray sort of path that's identified, and that path is a bike lane. There's kind of a tan orange colored designation, which would be plazas or sidewalks, sort of pedestrian zone. And then of course the green would be, excuse me, landscaped areas. And then we have the red, which are rooftops, and typically will be housing, although there are a couple of exceptions to that. So starting from the south, what we're showing here is taking that really wide right-of-way and introducing some additional market rate housing. And so envisioned here would be townhouse style units that have a shared common sidewall, sort of an urban edge type of living, loaded in the back with parking that would be perhaps a garage space inside the unit where they can pull in and then have first level access to the front and then a second story. So simple, basic 2-story construction, most likely, keeping them affordable to build and affordable for people who are sort of in that transitional urban living mode. So going along Cruse, then we have kind of this meandering path that engages the landscape area that we have. And along any point there, we can have benches and seating areas with trees. Try to create a desirable walking path. And then as we get to Cutler, we're narrowing that down to a 40-foot wide, the same street section of a 40-foot wide area, 2 drive lanes, parallel parking on either side. And then we could extend sidewalks on either side of that would extend up to Warren, which is the first street there, and possibly beyond. At all of the intersections, we eliminate the 8-foot parking area and bulb out the corners to reduce the pedestrian crossing width to 24 feet before you get to the other side, and that would happen at literally every node that we identify in all of the plans. So by narrowing up Cutler to a simple residential street, or the same street section as what we would have on Cruse, it does free up this triangle of property as well, which we're showing perhaps a multi-story housing project that M.E. Anderson and Helena Housing Authority could do in this section of the property. As we continue to move north along Cruse, there's sort of a node that we're starting to identify in all of the plans, which is right where the pedestrian underpath goes to Pioneer Park and Anchor Park on the other side. And in this scenario, we sort of have stairs that would lead down to that path from the east side, which do not exist now. And on the west side, there would be this overlook area into the park space. And then kind of the sort of bigger move is extension of the walking mall and connecting to the south end of the walking mall, relocating the neighborhood center in this scenario and making this a large park space. As we continue to move north then, there's another crossing where there's an existing covered stairway that goes down and ultimately sort of finds its way down near the windbag into the walking mall. And so that would be a narrowed crossing there. And then at the north end, and I'll come back to this at the fire tower area as well, we could provide some steps and access to the trail system that sort of leads up to the fire tower and the fire tower park area up here. And then we sort of identified there's a trail that sort of exists right now that leads down, and we could enhance that access through a stair that leads to that trail system as well. And then finally down here at the north end, narrowing up considerably. The current curb cut curves way back here, so we'd bring that all the way up so that we have a pedestrian friendly crossing of 24 feet right there. So then moving to the section between Broadway and Lawrence, kind of picking up where we left off on the last slide. Got pedestrian crossings. Again, got very wide crossings, pedestrian crossings on Cruse over here. So we narrow those up and make them a lot more pedestrian friendly. The extra 25 feet of right of way could be combined with the city lot number 6 in this scheme to introduce more townhouse style units, which could be accessed from both Warren and Cruse. And then right at this location, there's actually a stair that comes down from Warren that leads to the parking lot. And so in the interest of trying to improve connectivity from the east, particularly the east residential neighborhoods into the downtown, we have these several locations where we have paths, and this is an existing walkway that comes down to the alley by the Jackson Street garage, and then ultimately finds its way down into the walking mall. And then we sort of capture some space on either side of Cruse in the city parking lots, where we introduce some more townhouse style units. The Chamber building would still have access to their lot off of 6th Avenue and reduce one of the curb cuts onto Cruse to accommodate some of these houses. Then continuing north, we've got the intersection at 6th, and we're showing what could be a new apartment or condo building on the IR property. One of our stakeholder interviews was with some of the folks that are redeveloping this property, and they did make mention of housing on that property as well. So as we get to the section from 6th to Lawrence, I sort of shift the pedestrian focus across the street. And primarily because there's this opportunity across from the 7th Avenue gym, where we've got some pretty incredible views into our downtown. This location happens to be about 13 or 14 feet above the parking lot below. So there's these incredible views looking at Power Block, Montana Club building, our city county building, and sort of just panoramic across the downtown. So the thought of creating a little plaza space there that could have a staircase that leads down and ultimately could find its way to Constitution Park and again into the walking mall and Last Chance Gulch. So then as this walkway, this 25-foot zone is shifted to the north, it continues along the parking lot behind Bert and Ernie's and finally ends at Lawrence, where we show the opportunity and possibility of having maybe a mixed use retail type building that just fills in part of the lot, but not all of it. And so it makes its sort of relationship with the Holter Museum across, and it's kind of a urban infill sort of location. So the second solution, which sort of was an outgrowth of some ideas that came out of the stakeholder interviews, is to take Cruse Avenue for the majority of its length and eliminate vehicular traffic on the street altogether, with the exception of emergency service vehicles.
They must have caught it right at the right time, because normally it's just like massive.
So one of the things that we're showing in this solution is maintaining vehicular access from Park up to Cutler as a way to just loop traffic and not have to just always turn around and come back Park Avenue. And so the solution doesn't really change from Park to Cutler, but once you get to Cutler, it turns into a linear park that would be 65 to 80 feet in width. And so just sort of showing some more ideas in that park-like space where the neighborhood center parking lot is, for an outdoor amphitheater space, enhanced development of kind of a fire tower plaza that sort of makes this relationship between the actual fire tower of the plaza and this park-like space at the south end of the walking mall. But mostly it just becomes a much wider linear green space. There are additional opportunities to perhaps have another smaller amphitheater. The paths can meander a little bit more, obviously, and make their way from east to west. So then finally, as we get to the section from Broadway to Lawrence, the housing and infill pieces all remain the same. the primary difference is really just the pathways that lead through the linear park part of it. So when we get down, for example, down to the 7th Avenue gym, there's opportunity for a fairly sizable public plaza space as well. Couple of things that do change in this is the access to the upper lot 5 by the Jackson Street garage would have to be moved over to be accessed off of 6th instead of Cruse Avenue, which it does right now. So big picture, the two options sort of combined at a glance. We've got the first option of the narrowed street solution. The linear park idea. And the third we kind of threw in there was a hybrid solution that still keeps vehicular traffic from Broadway down to Mini Malfunction Junction, but eliminates vehicular traffic between Cutler and Broadway. So as Adam mentioned, these are all intentionally left as loose sketches at this point in time because we are in the gathering stage for people's ideas and comments. Really like to hear what people think might be strengths or weaknesses, and kind of open it up for discussion.
It seems like Kevin has some comments. Maybe you'd like to put voice to those.
Yeah, when I share my screen, I don't have the ability to see the chats that are out there. So somebody will either have to read them or chime in, unmute your microphone.
Sure. Yeah, Kevin, if you want to voice those comments, that'd be great, or I can read them, certainly. Looks like I will just read them. Sorry, he's got quite a few, so let me get back to the top. Okay, saying that he likes the narrowing of the street, but is not sold on the creation of another park. And is also asking, what are the long-term plans for the federal building below Cruse? I don't know if you can address that, Mike, or maybe Sharon can.
Yeah, we definitely can.
Okay.
Well, I may as well now. I mean, I guess let's just hit them as we go. So
Sure.
federal building is owned privately. The old federal building currently is full with state employees that are leasing that space. We did find out through our stakeholder interviews that they have just recently renewed a 20-year lease on that building. So it's not going anywhere. And the use is going to probably just remain as state office use.
Great, thanks. He also says he likes the dense housing on the left side, but thinks that closing the street altogether is a bad idea. Let's see. And doesn't think we need another large park, saying this is potentially valuable real estate. Let's see, let me go down. But is excited. Georgia says she's excited about the narrowing of Cruse and turning it into a green space and housing. She supports the denser downtown housing. And all the options that are, or amenities that are available there. I'm sorry, Georgia, if you want to put voice to these comments, that'd be fine too, if you're able.
I think Georgia said that her microphone's not working, but I think this should be an opportunity to maybe address the neighborhood center and talk about what their needs might be. I had a conversation with them this morning, and yeah, that facility has been a adapted to fit their needs in terms of the services that they provide to the community. It is an older building. It was constructed in the 1970s, so it's 50 years old. There is some concern about continuing to invest in that facility, continuing to make adaptive reuse investments, knowing that the facility is 50 years old and that at some point it's going to make more economic sense to build a new facility. It is inadequate for their current needs. They have multiple facilities that they currently have staff at, and so there is a need for them to look at or consider ways in which they can bring that all under one roof. And so I think this really speaks to maybe a broader conversation about RMDC and what the community can do to help, facilitate the continuation of those services in a more suitable building for their operations moving forward. So, I think those are some of the issues with the RMDC, and in terms of the, there's another question about downtown parking reduction, and Mike, maybe you could speak to the narrowing, the option 1 narrowing of the street and the amount of parking that you've actually been able to add, which would be, I think, a significant addition to the parking. Could maybe you walk through the parking implications for that option 1, and then, obviously option 2, we're removing quite a bit of parking from the downtown, but maybe you can speak to.
No, absolutely. The key to parking is there adequate parking in the downtown? And the next question is the parking located in the locations where it needs to be. And so the reality is, I've served on the parking commission and the BID board for 8 years. We did a lot of time talking about parking. Actually, that was when the Jackson Street garage was built, the Great Northern Garage, as well as the one behind the new State Fund building. And on the south end of Cruse, it's interesting because of these spurs that sort of lead to Park and into Cutler, there's actually only parking allowed on one side of the street, and the parking is actually fairly limited right now. For example, it's only allowed between where my cursor is now and this little spot here. And then I think it's allowed on the one side of the street going over here, but only for a ways as well because of the wide sort of connections to Broadway. So the narrowing of the street option actually introduces parking on both sides of the street for the entire distance. So we're probably, I would guess, increasing the parking on this area by 500% over what is currently on Cruse by itself. And we'll actually do the math and figure out how many parking spaces we're able to gain as we move forward. Where we get closer to the urban core, of course, down here, it changes a little bit because there are more options. We have the Jackson Street garage. We've got the medical arts garage. There are just a number of surface lots that, the interesting thing about all of these surface lots is they're extremely important to the businesses that are adjacent to the surface lots. But collectively, there's a lot of parking available within probably 2 blocks of any location in the downtown. So along Cruse Avenue, again, we haven't done calculations yet to see, because we're displacing some angled parking on Cruse, but we're also adding additional parallel parking. So my initial gut reaction is that that's probably a wash along the street itself. So what we're losing are where the new townhouses are going on the city lots. which is a justifiable concern to some of the businesses that are near to those locations. And that's something we'll definitely have to work through before we end up finally with a final solution and recommendation. But I think that's kind of a brief summary. I don't know if I missed anything, Adam, that we've talked about in other sessions.
Try to take myself off mute, but yeah, no, that was great, Mike. Thank you for that. Another comment is, oh, hi Pam, how are you? Pam Matardo joined us.
Hello.
Hello, thank you. Great question here regarding access to Fire Tower Park. Mike, I know that you had spoken on this in one of our previous group sessions. Could you respond to Pam's question? It is Fire Tower Park currently has no legal access beyond very steep social paths off Cruse, Bluestone parking lot, and the state parking lot on Broadway. What are plans for access if Pioneer Park is expanded to meet Fire Tower Park?
Yeah, that is a great question. And we had Christy Panozzo, I believe is how you pronounce it, the Parks Director with the city on earlier today, and she asked essentially the very same question. And we really can't fix the steep terrain. The western part of Fire Tower Park, because this is all city park right here, is very steep, but what has happened is people are creating, you know, the trails themselves, and you can see them in these Google Earth images. So our hope is to go out there and see how we can improve access up to the fire tower. And we sort of identified 2 locations, and these are just gestures right now. This might have to actually go up further to be effective. But this location right here, where our sort of access down to the underpass to the parks is, we can have some stairs and possibly some landing areas and some additional stairs that get people up to a point where it's level, a little bit more level, and access the upper part of the park. As you go to the north, there's this little parking area right here, which is about the only place you can park and have a gentle grade. I walked this about 2 weeks ago to actually get to the fire tower. But there is this little path that meanders down near the state parking garage. And so just like we were doing over by the Bluestone house, the idea is to have an enhanced walkway and maybe some landings that get people up to that trail system where it's more accessible. So that's as far as we've taken it right now. I think a little more study on that is definitely in order, because it's a great asset that just sits there and people don't really get to take advantage of it very much.
Mike, it's Pam. I don't know if you got the raised hand or not. I don't know if it worked. Is there potential access? What I'm thinking of is ADA access from the apartment house that is on, I think it's at Ewing. There's the apartment house that abuts the fire tower. Is there a possibility for ADA access there? Because the Broadway parking lot, my understanding is that's a state employee parking lot and not a city parking lot.
Right. I believe that is private.
So, you know, I don't think that's, and you really can't fit very many cars there. And it's odd because there's a home next to it.
Yeah.
There's really not much, there's kind of an ambiguous property line there. You don't know really where you are. So I'm wondering if maybe access from that apartment home, and then that apartment house would be possible if the owner has been contacted.
So I think that it's a little bit outside the realm of what we're studying right now, although I think it's definitely a good comment that needs to be looked at. I honestly didn't study very hard where city property starts and stops and ends, and where potential access from public right-of-way is on the eastern side of Fire Tower Park, which is the only way you would get any sort of accessible access.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of outside the scope of what we're looking at right now.
Okay.
That's kind of a lame answer, but we haven't studied it or looked at it.
Okay, because if you're talking about connecting and improving access to Fire Tower Park, they got to be able to get up there. Other than
Yeah,
ADA access is important.
I agree.
So Mike, Georgia had a question. I think if you pan over to the Cruse and Park intersection, she's wanting to know about a path up the slope into that Dale Harris Park area, and if there's going to be any plans for connectivity there.
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now, the little corner of this last unit is shown sort of right where that access point is. We looked at that this morning. Kathy Macefield had the exact same question. And, I guess that's something we're going to have to discuss with the city to see. And I don't know personally how, I guess, important it is to maintain access to that over time. But if it is, which I assume it would be, then we would probably want to eliminate a couple of these last units or shift the whole thing just slightly to the south a little bit so that we can maintain that access, and it would have direct connectivity to this trail system and the public walkways that we're showing as a part of this project. Or we may be able to improve it and shift it slightly to the east as well. I think there's solutions there.
Okay. Kevin had another comment. So the best part of the plan is the housing at Broadwater and Cruse, but he's not really sure about the rest. So, yeah.
So I think, one of the things that, we're starting to get consistent thoughts on are that the linear park idea is probably a little bit of a stretch. The narrowed street idea is definitely resonating stronger with most people. And so it's definitely leaning towards that direction. The larger park on the south end of the mall, other than the outdoor performance space of the amphitheater, most seem to think that we probably have enough park space down here. And so we probably will study an alternative approach to trying to improve connectivity between the walking mall and Cruse Avenue down here. And so if the neighborhood center stays as a building, whether they're in it or not, there is opportunity, I think. I'm just going to do some drawing on my screen. To perhaps have an enhanced connection to the north of the neighborhood center, and then maybe an enhanced, not something not as wide as the walking mall, but wider than just a sidewalk that sort of leads from this upper plaza. And I think in any scenario, we can develop that sort of Fire Tower Plaza space through change in asphalt material to concrete, for example, and maybe have a raised intersection here so that this area still is identified as sort of this connecting node between Fire Tower Park and Pioneer Park and Anchor Park. And so improve the connectivity down so that we still get that sort of loop ability for people who perhaps are coming to Helena and want to be able to walk through the historic district, and then perhaps get up here on the enhanced walkways along Cruse Avenue, because of the vistas and the views in the downtown are pretty incredible from up here. So it's interesting because this 25 feet plus the adjacent city parks, it's still going to seem park-like, which I think is going to be a very nice option.
So we're getting some questions about Pioneer Park and the library. You know, the library's remodel. Not sure what led to the decision to keep the building envelope the same and not expand. So Georgia had a question on that. So we don't have information on the library's decision to do that. With one question from Anne: if the plans go forward with removing the neighborhood center and turning it into an expansion of Anchor Park, what would happen to Pioneer Park? So one of the potential relocation sites for the neighborhood center could be locating it just across the walking mall to the park that's there, and doing a new facility that would, you know, meet their service needs, you know, for the next however many decades. It solves a number of issues for them. You know, replaces an older facility with a new one that would be, you know, more, you know, designed for their services and also their staffing needs. And then I think it also creates more functional use if we could, you know, basically swap where the building currently is with park space, and it creates a really cohesive, more functional park area here as well. And so that's one potential concept that, you know, again, just a concept. Things are very fluid. But I think it's going to really come down to, you know, the community's desire to see something like that happen or just remain in place. But that is one concept that has been discussed. So, you know, with that, it would really be an expansion in that park area to create a more cohesive, more functional park. So yeah, I think we need another comment from Georgia. I think we need to support our downtown businesses so it remains vibrant and a destination. Easy parking is key for them. I think that's been something that's mentioned in some of our other group meetings. Let's see. Another comment from Kevin: narrowing the street, enhancing the streetscape makes it a de facto park. And from Anne: I suggest asking the library, but I believe the difference deals with city owned and property. Okay. All right, so some good comments there. Thank you, everyone.
Looks like Pam has her hand raised. I'm not sure if that was from before or if Pam, you have a new comment.
Yeah, I had a new comment and it was in the comments there regarding Dale Harris Park, where you show those two, the two housing. There's a there's a stone structure that dates to Helena's earliest days, from 1860s, made out of stone, and you have to consider that it's right around that spot. I can't, you know, tell for sure from this layout where it is. But when you're putting those structures there, you have to consider that.
We'll get down to street level view and take a look. So Pam, can you orient? This is the little trailhead access that leads up to that.
Yeah, I have, hold on, I have a PowerPoint with a photo in it. Let me see if I can tell you exactly where it is from the PowerPoint. Hold on a second. This is the one I had sent you in.
Yeah.
Let me just pull it up here. Okay, so this one, so it is to the left of the Dale Harris Park sign there. You'll see some, it's kind of like a partial wall. I don't know what it was.
Oh, I see right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if it has anything to do with the listener well, or I'm not quite sure. Because if you look at the listener well behind Claim Stake, it has a similar wall built into Acropolis Hill.
Gotcha. I can say that the current, if I was to orient everybody on this plan, that would probably be up in right in this area where my cursor is.
Okay. Okay, so that's more in the footprint of Cruse than those apartments, the housing.
Yep. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. As a
okay.
matter of fact, like this is the street right here.
Okay.
We're
It's hard
right
to tell.
down at the
Yeah.
street area. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, any more comments, questions, or concerns that anyone would like to share? Okay, I'm not seeing any, and so we'd really like to thank everyone for.
Adam, Georgia had she just put one in the chat. Sorry, but I missed what the new building superimposed next to the library might be. I believe that's the red, yeah, between the library and the federal building, a potential Rocky.
Yeah, that's what that would represent, Georgia. You know, if a decision was made to relocate RMDC, this is a potential site for them. It would keep their location, you know, really where it is right now. I mean, just really right across from the Walking Mall, get them into a new facility, and you know, they need more square footage, and so that would be something that you know, should the community decide to move forward with, that could be a potential option. And you know, we think that, you know, that could probably be a most viable option for them if it was you know, the relocation option. Could RMDC go upwards in their existing building? That'd be a good question for an architect.
I know that. Yeah, unfortunately, it's usually very cost prohibitive to go vertical from a structure that already exists. The logistics of doing that make it pretty expensive. But more than that, if a building was built in the 70s, the building codes have changed significantly since then. And it's likely the current building as it sits wouldn't even meet current building codes, which none of them ever do, and that's not an issue. But when you go to update it or add on to it, especially if you were to go vertical, the entire building would have to be brought up to current codes, which is 99 times out of 100 a showstopper. It's the same scenario usually with parking garages, with earthquakes and seismic zones and things like that. When they were built to meet the codes of that time, but things become more stringent as more events happen.
Yeah, and this just kind of represents a concept for a site. You know, obviously this isn't where the building will be, but you know, it could take any number of configurations. The building could be up on the street, it could be set back, there could be a parking lot where that building is now. It could be brought up to the Walking Mall. You know, it could be turned sideways. You know, there's a lot of unanswered questions right now in terms of how that might look. But yeah, it is a concept. Oh, and it could even go over there.
I'm just messing. In reality, it actually could be built on their current parking lot with structured parking underneath or something like that. And if it was a multi-story building, could have multi-level access with access off of Cruse Avenue and then access from below. You know, and in this sort of a scenario, we could possibly even have the extension of the walking mall and it's still an expansion of the park space.
That's very interesting, Mike. That's really neat. Yeah, because you do have the residents from the Helena Housing Authority utilizing those services and having multi-level access along with that intersection improvement. That could solve a number of different issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think with each one, you start to see that, you know, the need here is to identify that there is a need and then start to study what alternatives are, and you flush out the pros and cons of all of those alternatives. But it is fairly common when you have a property that has a fairly large parking lot that is a part of it, and when you need to make a change, you can use that parking lot to build a new facility while you're still maintaining operations in your existing facility, and then sort of do it as a phased approach where you build the new and then you take down the old and convert it into parkland in this case.
Yeah, that seems like it addresses a number of issues with some prior comments of that people have shared, not wanting to touch that existing park space and keeping it as it is.
Yeah.
Mike, it looks like Georgia had another comment. She says, right now we use Pioneer Park for Alive at 5 and for Shakespeare in the Park. She hopes any new park design would consider those uses, and she references the amphitheater idea.
Yeah, that's a great comment. We were talking earlier as well. You know, anything like that, we really need to talk with all of the different venues in town to, you know, provide something that is mutually beneficial to everybody. Grand Street Theater. So yeah, it's a great comment.
And for those of you who maybe can't see the chat or don't know where it is, Pam asked if these slides were available online, and yes, they are available via the city's website. If you go to the Community Development Department site specific, and then current projects is where these are located.
Well, great discussion, everyone. Thank you very much for your input and your participation. I feel like every time we have one of these small group meetings, we get closer and closer to the right answer. And so your input has been very valuable for us as we go through and refine these concepts. So thank you. We hope that you'll be able to join us later this afternoon or this evening at 5:30. We'll discuss the wrap up, including the input and feedback that we've received from the small group meetings and what the next steps will be. And hopefully we will see you there.
Thanks, everybody.